Sometimes people think, oh, if I talk to them about sex, like, I'm gonna find out all the details, and it's like, no, just talk to them about what should be done, you know? Begin it with, she needs to say yes first.
And so we have to literally give them the phrase of what do you say in that moment, which is even just pausing for a minute and saying like, hey, I just want to make sure you're cool with us having sex.
Okay.
More than okay. That's actually incredibly sexy, and that makes any girl feel really taken care of. And I think if we can better program them with the right things to say and teach them that the impact that their actions have on people are actually very real and have potentially very serious consequences, maybe we could do something about preventing it.
The reality is that someone who commits sexual assault is almost never a one-time offender and will often find victim after victim.
Can't believe Hannah Baker finally came to one of my parties.
The scene in episode 12 of Hannah and Bryce in the hot tub was one of the two most difficult scenes to film. We didn't look away from the sexual assaults in the show, because to do otherwise is to minimize what those characters go through and what teenage girls go through every day.
Well, I gotta get going. My parents are probably super worried right now. One of the biggest goals was to try and represent everything as authentically and as truthful as possible. And Jessica Yu, who directed this episode, she really did put a lot of thought into the way it was going to be shot. You know, in the scene, we stay on Hannah's face, and it's actually the script where it says we stay on Hannah's face longer than is comfortable. And I think it's important that we did that because it is uncomfortable.
I think it does a great job of showing you kind of exactly what this person might be going through.
We had counselors advise us in the writing of it, in the shooting of it. They talked to Dustin Prentice, who played Bryce, to Catherine Langford, who plays Hannah, really helping them understand what's going through the characters' minds at this moment, why they behave the way they do.
I spoke with Rebecca Hedrick and Rebecca Kaplan from It's On Us, and you know what I learned was it kind of had a bit of an insight into what people go through whilst an assault is happening.
Whenever someone is faced with a major trauma, they have the fight, flight, or freeze response. They will either fight their way out of it, run away from it, or freeze. And especially if there have been accumulated trauma in the past, then one of the more likely option would be to freeze. And that's what happened with Hannah.
She might even dissociate a little bit. A lot of times victims of trauma talk about feeling apart from their body. She goes blank, you see the light go out of her eyes. She's completely lost her sense of self at that point.
Very rarely do I think we show the bravery and the candor and the pain that exists on the other side of being a survivor, and how damaging, how deeply damaging that is. Both we see with Hannah, obviously, and we also see with Jessica.
When you're in that position, it is so hard to reach out because you feel like you're going to burden someone else, or you don't think people want to listen, or you don't think people care.
So many girls are afraid to come forward when something like this happens because immediately the victim shaming oftentimes is actually worse than even the initial assault.
They have their entire character judged, criticized.
Well, why was she wearing this? Why did she go to that house? Why didn't she do X, Y, Z? When really that's not the point.
I think we need to start these conversations differently, and instead of asking what she did or didn't do, we need to ask what he did and why he was doing it.
It's on us to educate people on how to receive that kind of information when girls do have the courage to come forward.
You okay?
Fine.
Yeah? You don't look fine.
Rape should be a topic that we should all be able to talk about and not feel ashamed. I want survivors to know that it's not your fault and it's okay to talk about it. And you need to build a good support system to be able to heal.
The more often you tell your story of being assaulted, the more it loses power over you. I hope that people watching this show will feel empowered to be able to go to someone for help.
We see Jessica going through that process, reaching out to someone that she knows loves her, that hopefully she can, really get the help of adults to come in and professionals to come in and help her with that, because I don't think any girl should ever go through that alone or think that she can handle that alone.
Some of you cared. None of you cared enough. Neither did I. And I'm sorry.
By the time we reach the last day of Hannah's life, she is completely depleted. It's beyond simply being depressed. She thinks her life is worth nothing. And she thinks her life really only exists as a problem to other people. And she has been treated time and time again as an object. So her sense of self and her sense of agency, her sense that anything she can do can make things better, is gone.
She stops trying and she stops reaching out for any lifelines, and she's not strong enough or healthy enough at that point to stand up and assert herself. Sometimes I'll hear a parent say, well, not my kid. He would never do that, or she would never do that, because she's really smart. Her grades are good, and it has nothing to do with that.
Young adults haven't fully formed their frontal lobe, or their executive function as we call it, and so everything that happens feels like this is forever. They often feel like there's no way out, and this can lead to very impulsive acts.
We had a number of people ask us along the way why we had Hannah kill herself in the way we did, and why we showed it. We worked very hard not to be gratuitous, but we did want it to be painful to watch, because we wanted it to be very clear that there is nothing in any way worthwhile about suicide.
Hannah! Come on.
We just wanted to make that moment particularly as realistic as it possibly could be without ever having experienced that. That's the moment, the sort of pinnacle of the series, where you talk about wanting to do honor to the people that have actually had to go through this in their lives. Like, you want to pay tribute to them and make it real and authentic.
As hard as it was to see the final decision that Hannah made when she died of suicide, I think it was important to show that it's not a pretty death, it's not an easy one, and then the pain that never ends for her parents immediately thereafter, who are left with this horrible burden.
One of the things that when I talk to parents, when I talk to Doctor Who, that it was important to sort of get a context for how it completely consumes your life.
It's important for the viewers to see that there's often a lot of collateral damage when someone dies, and the person contemplating suicide might not realize how much their death will affect people that they love and that they didn't want to hurt.
For those of you who will now be looking for signs everywhere, what does it really look like? Here's the scary thing. It looks like nothing.
There are statistics that say that for every suicide, there's at least 6 people who are very intimately impacted.
People are at a higher risk of suicide if someone that they know has died by suicide. And it seems counterintuitive, and yet the person who survived somebody else's suicide often feels guilty and can blame themselves. And that seems to be a large part of what happens with Alex.
Alex Standall shot himself in the head last night. He's in critical condition at Mercy.
Suicide is now the second leading cause of death for teenagers, and every warning sign, every symptom of depression should be taken seriously. A drastic change in behavior, a drop in their grades, getting in fights with their peers or parents or authority figures, substance abuse. These are all different signs to look out for.
A lot of times it feels like the things that you're experiencing aren't treatable, and that's why it can be overwhelming to try to explain it to someone, because you just feel like there's nothing you can do about it, but there usually is.
It's absolutely treatable. Anxiety is, depression is, talk therapy, treatment centers. There's a million ways that you can find help.
I think a lot of times people feel paralyzed by, I don't know how to talk about this, maybe it'll go away, maybe they seem okay. I don't feel equipped to talk about it, but then nobody talks about it, and that's actually the worst thing that any of us can do. Really, it is about just listening and saying, I'll be there and we'll find the help together.
If someone watching this is feeling like their life doesn't have worth, I hope that you see around Hannah in this show all the people who care about her and know that there are those people in your life as well.
It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be perfect and for everything to be exactly right every moment of the day, but that you can get past that. It gets better. You won't always feel this bad.
Reach out, even if you feel like Hannah and that you can't talk to your parents or you don't want to tell anyone at school because you're embarrassed. Call a hotline. Talk to someone anonymously. Just talk to someone. Because the minute you start talking about it, it gets easier. And just know that there's life beyond what you're feeling at the moment. I promise it will get better. There is an entire future of incredible things waiting for you. And if you go, you don't get to see it.
I hope that this show really opens up a lot of conversations and helps people realize the smallest thing that you do, the smallest thing that you do to someone, the smallest thing that you say can change so much for better or worse.
Sky. Hey, Sky.
What?
Hey, how's it going? It's more than a show about a young woman's suicide or sexual abuse, sexual violence, right? It's much more than that. And I think it's a wonderful way the show ends, with Clay just taking a minute to acknowledge a woman who's in his life who he hasn't connected with in a while. And it's those small steps which I think can make a big difference.
I've seen that make a difference, and I've had people actually on their way to harm themselves kind of stall because they were thrown off because somebody was nice.
And I think that's where it starts. It just starts with, reaching out to people, and saying, hey, what's up? You matter to me. I'm glad you're in my world.
It has to get better. The way we treat each other and look out for each other. It has to get better somehow.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying that you need help. And if you need help at all, you can go to 13reasonswhy.info to find an organization in your area. You can help others by spreading it as well.